This episode of Over a Barrel is brought to you by Night or day, rain or shine, Valero keeps the pumps full 24/7, 365 with a reliable fuel supply. Because keeping pumps fueled keeps business pumping and communities moving right now. Coming up on Over a Barrel, Hurricane Milton, now a Category 5, and crude oil prices are spiking, but for what reason? Those things and a lot more right now on Over a Barrel. Welcome to Over a Barrel. I'm your co-host, Matt McLean. Patrick DeHaan as well. He's the other co-host. He is actually not in Chicago at the moment in time. Patrick, hello, and how are you, sir?
Well, my virtual background didn't decide to work today, so everyone can see that I am on location. One of the biggest industry events of the year, the National Association of Convenience Stores, is putting on a trade show here in Las Vegas. A lot of really nerdy stuff, Matt, for those that don't know. Your convenience store, everyone that's in that convenience store will be here. I am there as well, and we'll maybe share some of that with you. But yeah, certainly a different edition here from Las Vegas.
Yeah, and we've certainly got a lot of stuff going on right now. As of the time of the recording of this particular podcast, very recently, within the past few hours, Hurricane Milton was upgraded to a Category 5 on the Saffir-Simpson scale. That there isn't anything higher than that. That's as high as the scale goes. And it is not just a weak Category 5. If there were such a thing, it's actually more along the lines of a healthy Category 5. And I don't mean that in a positive light, just meaning that it is a very, very strong storm. Patrick, the track of this has me genuinely concerned.
Yeah.
As you know, you have spent a lot of time in Tampa. I lived there for years. I have many, many friends that live in the Tampa Bay region. This is the worst possible nightmare scenario that could possibly exist. In fact, the Weather Channel, a good number of years ago, in their documentaries, It Could Happen Tomorrow. A lot of people may remember those, where meteorologist Jim Cantore anchored those and hosted those.
Yep.
A Category 4 hurricane hitting Tampa Bay right up the mouth of the Bay waters itself was one. Season 2, Episode 13 actually is the particular episode in question of that. And the way that it was described was something that just kind of puts a chill up and down your spine. For those in reference, there's a particular reason why we're obviously talking about this. The Port of Tampa provides not only fuel for the Tampa Bay region, but it is such an important port. There's even a pipeline that takes fuel inland to the Orlando area. So when you combine the two metropolitan areas, you actually have a monstrous metropolitan area that it would, if they were combined, would be the third largest metropolitan area in the nation. Only Los Angeles and New York, or actually to be more proper about it, New York and then Los Angeles would be larger in population base. This is a very serious situation. It is something that we are monitoring. Now, my question to you, Patrick, is with regard to the alerts that are going out, up to a 12-foot storm surge in the Bay waters themselves. The Port of Tampa's on the Bay waters, understandably, because they barge in their fuel. The Bay waters themselves, on average, are 12 feet deep. I've known this because I lived there for years. But a 12-foot storm surge on top of that would literally more than double the average depth of what the Bay waters typically are, and that does not include wave action. I don't see an avenue where the Port of Tampa doesn't sustain, if the forecasts hold true. I don't see an avenue where the Port of Tampa doesn't sustain quite a bit of damage here. But am I misreading this idea?
No, I think this is going to be a really challenging event. We're already looking at, you mentioned Port Tampa already is at condition X-ray, which means that they're expecting that they'll be shutting down here within the next 48 hours. Obviously, with you mentioning that Tampa is the port for much of the gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel that comes into not only Tampa, but Orlando as well. Fuel is probably going to be more of a challenge with this storm than Helene, which was, just a week and a half ago. So Along with the sheer magnitude, the size of this storm being a Category 5. Now, I do believe the National Hurricane Center said there is a little bit of wind shear, which may reduce it to a Category 4. But I mean, we're still talking about,
it's
millions
catastrophic.
of Floridians that are evacuating, and Governor DeSantis already issued a state of emergency in all of Florida's counties. So we actually also saw gasoline demand yesterday spike 25% in what we call Pad 1, which includes Florida. Basically, Pad 1 is the region of the country that includes all of the East Coast. So that is indicative that we're already seeing a flurry of evacuees heading out of Florida. And along with Port Tampa, which is going to be shutting down here very soon, in the path of this storm, now it is accelerating. That's the good news, is that, it's certainly not going to sit there. But I think fuel supplies could become challenged after this. And especially, as you mentioned, if there's damage to the port afterwards, inspections are going to have to be conducted, right, to make sure that the port is still usable, or it's still can be navigated by the barges. So I think, GasBuddy's gas availability tracker, or what we call our fuel emergency tracker, is still activated for Florida after Helene. But we may see a situation where we see more gas supply disruption. Hopefully not on what we saw after Hurricane Harvey and Irma. But the size of the storm, the intensity, the amount of people likely evacuating is going to make this a really challenging situation.
You bring up the evacuations. You were reading my mind. Just in the urban core of the Tampa Bay region, there's more than 3.5 million residents. That does not include, obviously, tourism, but residents. 5.5 million in the Tampa Bay designated market area, as what it is typically called. It's a broadcast terminology, but that's what it is. You have a situation at hand. I used to drive by the port every day for years. I know for a fact it is not 12 feet above sea level. I know for a fact because I have driven by it many, many times. The question mark has, in my mind, a direct hit by a hurricane has not happened in the Tampa Bay region in 103 years. They have no form of recollection or experience in this. Nobody was alive, if you know what I'm saying. And even if you've survived and gone through hurricanes in other parts of the country or the other parts of the state, topographically speaking, Tampa Bay is very different as far as the way things move water-wise. Do you see a potential, and I know that we have talked about this about other storms. I know back in, was it Irma? Or I remember you being in Tallahassee a few years back at the request of the state. They wanted you in basically the State Emergency Operations Center on behalf of GasBuddy to help provide the most up-to-date information. Were there shortages then? I'm not trying to incite or scare people. I'm trying to be factual. Were there, if I remember correctly, there were some issues. They were trying to truck gasoline in, and the sheer nature of potential evacuees is the point of bottlenecking of the fuel supply. It becomes a problem because you're talking, again, a couple million people minimum that are having to relocate. And you can't just relocate and write it out in your car. You got to go somewhere. And there obviously are not enough hotel rooms. There's obviously not enough everything, within a handful of miles. So what then? How does GasBuddy respond at that particular point in time with regard to making sure that people can find out additional information as it goes around? Because GasBuddy has quite an elaborate system set up for things like this.
Yeah, we do. And as I mentioned, our fuel tracker has been online, and hopefully, we'll start to see people reporting the information that they're experiencing to the GasBuddy app. And you can do that when you're in the GasBuddy app, when you're in an area that we have activated this functionality for, such as Florida. You will see different icons with gas icons, power icons, diesel engine icons that you are able not only to report the price of gasoline, which is what we do on a daily basis, but you'll also be able to report if you see a station that doesn't have gas, that doesn't have diesel, or doesn't have power. And that information, Matt, oftentimes we share that, have shared that in the past with authorities, such as what you're mentioning during Hurricane Irma back in 2017. We were using that information in real time to help make decisions on things like evacuation corridors, where traffic should be flowing to. So that's how, in turn, we use that information that's submitted to us to try and improve the situation, which is probably going to be pretty rough in this, instance. So, and I really quick want to, for those of us watching on YouTube, those of you that don't, you can watch the video of what we're sharing on YouTube, but I'll quickly share the kind of the infrastructure here from Florida. You'll see that most of the supply is coming from the Gulf Coast, and we know that that is going to essentially be blocked here in the days ahead. You see there Port of Tampa, Port Manatee, which is the southern portion of Tampa. You see the pipelines that connect Tampa to Orlando, and then you see that product that comes through Tampa also goes down to areas like Sarasota and Fort Myers, right? So much of the western half of Florida, if you were to split it in two, gasoline is coming from Tampa. So there's going to be probably some challenging times for folks in these areas. The more north you get towards Georgia, there are more direct pipelines. And that's the good news. So if you're evacuating, try to get north, whether it's to Jacksonville or Tallahassee. The product, the gasoline that you're filling up with is coming via different means. And as you get into Georgia, then you have really direct access to the Colonial Pipeline, which is a massive pipeline that delivers gasoline. So that should be it. And in these instances, as you and I, Matt, have talked in last couple episodes, as we've been in hurricane season, traditionally the best bets are some of the biggest truck stops, right? The convenience store chains all do a very good job because they have specialized people that are supplying, right, making sure that they're ahead of the situation, and they have a lot more resources that they can pull in from other areas to make sure that those fuel trucks are coming on a consistent basis. So that's always the best bet, is kind of stick with those bigger brands. The highway travel stops are very good at making sure that they stay ahead of these types of situations.
It is definitely something to keep a very watchful eye on. No question about it. It is, like I said, it's just, even if this thing weakens a touch, the momentum is already there. The swells are already there in the ocean. If you remember back in, I believe it was 2005, or maybe it was a little bit earlier, that Hurricane Katrina, it ballooned and mushroomed into a Category 5, but when it hit New Orleans, it became a Category 3. The problem is they learned during that storm, forecasters did, that the momentum in the water and the way that things move around has already been built into the storm at that point, and a slight weakening isn't really going to impact things like storm surge and other aspects. So once the momentum is there and the ocean is churning as it is, dropping 20 miles an hour in speed as far as the wind speed really isn't going to impact or decrease a lot of the storm surge concern. And as I said, for many, many years working in broadcasting there, you run from the water, you hide from the wind. And so that's, again, it's an area of concern, understandably, because so many millions of people, and this is expected to stay a hurricane through Orlando. And of course it will be weakening as it continues to move inland, but nevertheless, you have a wide swath of people with a lot of power outages potentially. And the more outages you have, the longer it takes to get the more infrastructure you have to rebuild.
Yeah, so, exactly right. There's a lot of things that we'll be watching here from this, from Milton as the storm moves towards Florida. Looking at from the price aspect, Matt, these types of events, Florida is not a very big state when it comes to infrastructure. There have been some oil platforms out in the Gulf of Mexico with this major storm that are being evacuated as a precaution. The price of oil, the price of gasoline don't really respond to this specific storm. Florida's average gas price is actually down about 7 cents a gallon in the last week. And that kind of, begs the question too. Oil prices are not impacted or will not be impacted from this event, but they have gone up. Since last time we spoke, the Middle East has certainly erupted after Iran attacked Israel. The price of oil jumped from $68 a barrel last week to about $76 a barrel today. So while Milton is not going to be a driver of fluctuations in what you pay at the pump now, as I look, Matt, oil now up 3.5%, almost $3 a barrel. Now we're at $77 a barrel. So gas prices had been easing last week. The national average dipped about 4 cents from last week. But, this is kind of the calm before the storm. In terms of gas prices will start going up. And a lot of this is really focused on the Middle East. So
that's
if you're
exactly
fueling up,
what you were. Yeah.
Yeah. If you need to fuel up, I do expect the national average will start to go up. The wholesale price of gasoline is going up pretty considerably because of what's happening in the Middle East.
Yeah, and we do need to talk about what's going on in the Middle East before we get into that. Just anybody who may be watching this to gather additional information who's in the path of the storm, please pay attention to your local officials. Please pay attention to your local news media. Heed the advice. If you're in an evacuation area, get out. Don't stay, please. That is something that I have said for many, many years. But yes, please take care of yourself in all of that, and you're certainly in our thoughts and prayers, especially with all the impending situations. Don't touch that device. We've got more Over a Barrel coming up right after our sponsor, Valero.
All across America, you'll find Valero at your go-to gas station, volunteering with local charities and fueling communities 365 days a year, so you can always get where you need to be, right now.
And now for the rest of Over a Barrel, what's going on in the Mideast. So let's talk about that a little bit. It was such that we kind of all got a little bit of a jolt. We got, in fact, the oil markets kind of got a little bit of a jolt. So tell us kind of the rundown of what's transpired over the last several days.
Well, Matt, as we mentioned, the price of oil has absolutely skyrocketed compared to last week. We went from about $67, $68 a barrel. Now we're up to $77. So, that's what a 15 to 17% climb here just in the last 7 days. And all of this really because of Iran launching, I think, what is over 100 missiles into Israel. Israel has promised retribution. They could certainly target Iran's oil infrastructure. The U.S. has promised to help Israel in terms of a response. The U.S. could ratchet up pressure by enforcing sanctions or even potentially new sanctions on Iran, which would then throttle the flow of Iran's oil. So there's suddenly a much more significant risk to either the supply of oil from Iran or the fact that Israel could potentially attack Iran's oil infrastructure, which, certainly it's getting a lot more attention this time around as they continue to escalate, Matt. I mean, a couple months ago when Iran launched drones into Israel, right, it was kind of the collective thinking that there was going to be a response from Israel, but we continue to see increased pressure back and forth as Iran has escalated and then Israel escalates. So I think this is kind of trending into an event that is probably going to continue to see more violence and maybe more attacks on each other. And so that's certainly why oil prices have reacted in the way that they have, is because there's much more risk of potential disruption in one way or another.
It's the major area of concern, no question. I think what probably grabbed most people's attention was potentially what Iran used to launch toward Israel. They didn't use something like a slower drone or, a slower missile. They used their hypersonic missiles to launch against Israel, and it doesn't look as if Israel is going to attack back, but more like when. That seems to be the general consensus by everything that we are certainly seeing out of the responses of what Israel's cabinet and the government officials. I'll just put it that way, rather than go down through a lengthy list. But it's not if, but when. Yeah, like you said, how measured will they be? What exactly will they attack? And then will Iran? How does it go from there? Do we go down a slippery slope? And do you think the markets are beginning to possibly factor that into the concept of the price of a barrel of crude oil? That what I would basically call a tit for tat, so to speak, as the old saying would go. Now that Israel and Iran are kind of exchanging stuff back and forth in a more concerning way, where do we go from here, and how does that work?
Well, I don't think at this point we know, because while Israel's promised retribution attack, we don't know what that's going to look like, right? And if Iran will respond to that. Now, I did pull up here for those, again, that are able to see video. Infrastructure in Iran is one of the things that Israel certainly could attack. We've pulled up Google map of Karg Island. Essentially, you can see there a lot of the oil infrastructure that exists that Israel could certainly readily strike. Now, I don't think it would come to that. I think the U.S. would try to steer Israel away from potentially attacking oil infrastructure. But you can't always, you can't always know how Israel is going to choose to respond. So there's a lot of risk here. The one thing I will say about this situation is OPEC does have adequate spare capacity. We've been talking about that the last couple of episodes, and certainly well before that OPEC has been cutting oil production for over a year now to keep the price of oil higher. And so OPEC, certainly led by Saudi Arabia and Russia, would be able to produce more oil or sell more oil into a market if there is any disruption from Iran. So that's somewhat of a stopgap, would act as somewhat of a ceiling on the price of oil, but there's still probably more that oil could rise if there is something more meaningful.
It's funny you say that, because I have a news story pulled up here. I won't throw it onto the screen, but I'll just quickly quote a little bit of it. It says, basically talking about President Biden last week, saying that his administration was, quote unquote, discussing the possibility of supporting an Israeli strike on Iran's oil facilities. And that's what, according to this, oil prices spiked by more than 4%. Then the following day, the president sought to alleviate some concerns, telling reporters that the Israelis, quote, should be thinking about other alternatives than striking oil fields, unquote. So to your point, there's a little bit of that discussion obviously taking place, and that's just what's bubbling over before a microphone, not what the actual conversations are like. But the question is, what would make logical sense to strike back on? And you see what I'm saying? Like, I mean, what kind of a meaningful retaliatory or reactionary strike would Israel, where would they go? What would they strike is the question mark.
That's $1 million question mark. I don't even know that they've made up a decision on, what they'd strike, but I know the U.S. would probably try and steer them to something that the U.S. would find more sensible. And of course, one of the questions has been ahead of the U.S. election, the other question was, is Israel, are they doing this ahead of the election to steer the election? The price of oil goes up. That could potentially steer the election. Although I think most Americans, with gas prices, still relatively low, I don't think there's much risk that gas prices are going to go up to levels that Americans would change their vote over. You know what I mean? Because even if gas prices went up to the upper threes, that still starts with a 3. So that's not psychologically that big of a challenge. If oil and gas prices skyrocketed and stayed there like $4 or $5, then that would be problematic. But I don't think really anyone knows what Israel, what their plan might be. Just that there is certainly risk there, and depending on what they attack, it could have a great impact on prices. The other thing too is, at least this is not happening in the summer, when there is very little margin for error, when the market is very sensitive to any strife in the Middle East. So that this is happening in fall, Matt, it's part of the reason why gas prices haven't really reacted so much just yet. The other question I got, oil prices, as we mentioned, are up $8 to $9 a barrel from last week. But if you look at average gas prices across the country, which I'll quickly pull up here, the national average is actually at just $3.12 a gallon. So, there's been kind of this interesting disconnect that, while this is happening, oil prices are skyrocketing, but at the same time, gas prices now down 7 cents from a week ago, and that's temporary.
Yeah. They've dropped here locally by up to a dime a gallon at some stations that I've noticed just in the past 3 to 5 days, which I thought was, after seeing crude oil prices, after seeing all of that, I'm like, well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Did not expect to see that.
Yeah, no, I think very few folks, expected to see gas prices still going down. But this number, this $3.12 a gallon, that is certainly going to be higher the next time we talk, or if we talk next week, it's going to be higher. So, and a lot of that is going to be because of this $8 to $9 bill increase we've seen in the price of oil over the last week. So if you like declining prices, Matt, as I know you do, you're going to have to hold your breath for maybe a couple of weeks until what happens in the Middle East either cools down or, something happens. Let's hope it's not, something significant, but it's not looking good. And gas prices are set to certainly go up here over the next week or two.
All right. Well, it is certainly something that we will keep a very watchful eye on both of these things. On a slightly lighter note, let's talk about how you managed to get to Las Vegas versus how you normally do it. Normally, you show up at O'Hare, usually O'Hare. I don't.
The smart person would.
And you decided we talked about this during the last episode, so we need to give an update here. I told you to take the GasBuddy mobile. It has 4 wheels, and you chose not to. You chose to ride this thing in on a motorcycle. Lord have mercy. Talk to us about this experience.
Yeah, well, I did use the GasBuddy app, and I was quickly trying to load up my GasBuddy app to see how many times I've stopped for fuel, because it's definitely been a couple. Let's see here.
I would say
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 stops for fuel in the last 3 days. So I've seen my fair share of gas stations. Thankfully, I think most of these stations, with the exception of getting into the mid-country, it was $3. But I'll tell you what, Matt, I think even me, you have a deep appreciation for how beautiful this country is. Maybe not so much the plains, maybe not so much Illinois, where it's all cornfields, and Iowa and Nebraska. But once we got into Colorado, we also went into Utah, Nevada. We kind of ducked through Arizona. The West is just a really beautiful place.
Absolutely. And you are intentionally coming back a different way that you came, if I remember correctly, because you've got some goals. I did the same exact thing whenever we were doing the podcast in Washington, D.C. last month. I did the same exact thing, although I was on 4 wheels, thankfully, and not 2 wheels, because I'm not that guy. That's you, but that's not me. But it is such a gorgeous, if you don't ever, I encourage anybody, a road trip like that.
Road trip.
It is, listen, life is short. You spend some time, have some fun, talk about things like that, do some things like that. You're coming back, if I remember correctly, on the, basically the path of the old Route 66 that pretty much everybody's familiar with.
Yeah, that's right. And, I'll quick throw my route up here so those, that are road tripping can see the portions that were fun and the portions that were maybe less fun. Going through, Illinois, Iowa, Nebraska got a little bit boring, but Western Nebraska and certainly Colorado, we also made a stop or basically skirted Salt Lake City, and then coming down I-15 was just absolutely stunning. And I got to see a lot of gas stations, and there were some interesting things too. Some of the travel stops that we passed, certainly a huge difference between 2 travel stops, like 2 truck stops, same exit. The diesel price might have been 50 cents a gallon difference. The gas price might have been the same. So, it's just amazing, the disparity. One station for diesel, I think, was like $3.35, and the other was $3.85. So, there were definitely some interesting things, and I had been a little bit sarcastic on social media talking about the 85 octane gasoline they have in the higher elevations, because higher elevations, the air is less dense, so you don't need all the octane, because your car, essentially at higher altitudes with that less density air, you don't need as high of octane of fuel. So now that we're back in Las Vegas, the fuel has magically gone back up. in terms of octane. But yeah, there's a lot of things to see out in the western half of the country. And to your point, absolutely, road trips beautiful, and they wouldn't be possible without the men and women who work at all the C-stores across the country. So shout out to all those, because I did stop 14 times. I did stop for pizza. I think there were tacos involved. There were hot dogs that were eaten as well at some of these gas stations. So it was a great time. But to your point, we will be taking Route 66 back. It does get a little bit hot when you're on two wheels, Matt, coming down into Las Vegas in 100-degree temperatures. The asphalt was probably, I don't know, you probably could have cooked an egg. We're talking about how hot it is. And I was melting after I pulled into Las Vegas, drenched in sweat. That's the other thing on two wheels. You have to stay hydrated.
Right.
I was a little bit jealous of all the cars towards the end, because we were just talking back and forth about how cold the AC would be in our hotel. And that's just one of the things you appreciate is I saw these people going into the convenience store, coming out with a big drink, whatever, right, to stay hydrated or because they want to. It's one of the things that's a little bit harder on a motorcycle is to, take your gear off, take your gloves off and eat or drink, and you have no AC. So two wheels or four wheels. I really love two wheels, but I did get jealous of those four wheels every once in a while.
I mean, I think it said 1,800 miles. I cannot
2,000.
I mean,
is what we ended up with. Yeah. 2,000 miles over 4 days.
I mean, you rode a motorcycle for days. Are you sore?
Well,
I mean,
well, ask me in another 2 days. But for now, I feel pretty great. We would, we'd hop off and take breaks for 20 minutes and, stretch our legs. But, overall, I feel pretty great about it. And that's the other thing, too, is in 10 years, I probably would not be able to do that so much as I can now. And by the way, cool fun fact is that our hotel charges $18 in Las Vegas for cars to park. They charge $0 for motorcycles. So definitely take advantage.
My mind. I was actually going to say they better at least only charge half price because it's two wheels instead of four. So, I mean, come on.
No, it's great.
Fantastic.
And we get a park right by the entrance. So we don't even have to go looking for a spot. There's designated motorcycle spots. Are surprising, too, some of the license plates of the other motorcycles. There's only about 6 of them parked out there. But I was impressed because some of these motorcycles were from Canada. We literally had 2 or 3 bikes that had license plates from Alberta. So somebody put in just as many miles as we did.
Y'all are crazy. I just want to throw it out there. But that's just my personal opinion, and I'm going to say it because I can. Yeah, I'd love to travel in a nice SUV.
And a nice SUV. The other thing, too, is, one of the pet peeves of traveling that many miles is how many people like to camp on our journey, and they tend to camp in that left lane. So that was fun. Got some great war stories of maybe going a little bit too fast and coming up on state troopers. That was interesting.
Are you sure you want to admit that publicly on a podcast? Just saying.
Oh, hey, no, we didn't do anything wrong. We didn't get pulled over a single time, so we complied with the law.
What's your license plate number, Patrick? Give us that over the air, too, while we're at it. Come on, man.
Oh, Matt, I think I have a picture of your vehicle here. I'll give them your plate number. I have one of those things, how am I driving? If there was a how I'm driving hotline bumper sticker on my plate, I can imagine. No, there'd be no calls. Come on now. By the way, other interesting thing when it comes to that is I didn't know that across most of Nevada, the speed limit, actually even southern Utah, the speed limit's 80 miles an hour. Mm-hmm. I was thinking I knew that was in Texas, and Texas has different speeds at day and night.
Yeah, you will be satisfied if you're going through Oklahoma, which Route 66 would take you. You would be satisfied with the speed limit through there as well, for the most part, except for portions of the turnpike. I believe it's also 80 miles an hour. I was through there a couple of years ago to Tulsa, and if I remember correctly, the speed limit at the moment I left the Missouri state line, it popped up to 80, 75 or 80, but I'm pretty sure it was 80. But I'm telling you, there's all kinds of stuff there.
Yeah, and here's a look. Texas, right? Texas actually has some spots are 85 miles an hour. So,
yep. How fast does your motorcycle go?
We'll hopefully. Well, for this, the purpose of this trip, Matt, it was pretty much locked at 80 miles an hour in those 80 mile an hour zones. So,
bless your heart. I don't even know if that's a northern or a southern. Bless your heart. I don't know. I don't know.
Well, it was a fun ride. There were actually a lot of spots too where we were not going the speed limit because there was just so much beauty. We were going through canyons. We went through Zion National Park. Just so much incredible scenery to take in that it doesn't make any sense just flying through those areas. So,
yeah, flyover country is actually quite beautiful for the most part. So, hey, this whole little conversation about a journey and a road trip is just a good reminder that no matter how crazy things can get in the world, it's always good to take a few minutes and just relax a little bit and try to enjoy your surroundings because life can get stressful at times, no question.
Yeah, there's some beautiful scenery out there, and I have way more smartphone apps for convenience stores than I ever thought I'd have. I've pretty much got everyone's app, I think, when it comes to C-stores because they all have their different awards, and they all, 5 or 10 cent discounts. So, but of course, the GasBuddy app is the one I use most. And by the way, Matt, in Utah, there was a little bit of a price war between a couple stations. Everyone else in Utah was like $3.50, $3.40. The station in Utah that we filled up, I checked this morning, is down to $2.66 a gallon, which is pretty.
That is pretty good. That's about what I'm paying here in Kentucky. So that is pretty good there. You cut out just a little bit there because you're on the lovely hotel Wi-Fi, but now he's
the beauty.
He's back to being super crystal clear. Patrick, I think that's going to pretty much wrap things up for today. Enjoy the convention. And obviously, for those of you in the Southeast, when you pull open your GasBuddy app, it might look a little bit differently simply because it's under kind of that severe weather mode / whatever the disaster mode. I don't know exactly what it is that GasBuddy calls it. You can help me out with that, Patrick, for sure. But, the key is, go ahead.
We call that the fuel availability tracker, and that's still active for Florida and the Carolinas as well. So open the GasBuddy app up, and you'll see that you're in an area that we expect a natural disaster. And I really wish we could be a little bit more nuanced with what's happening. But if you're in Florida, the GasBuddy app, all you have to do is load it up, and you'll see that there's a different experience in there.
And while you're in Vegas, understandably, for those who monitor GasBuddy and the different releases and stuff, I guess you'll be keeping people up to date. Should there be any kind of a supply issue post-storm, you'll be letting folks know?
Yeah, I will. I'll be trying to push out as much information on my X account, GasBuddy Guy. So we'll keep on top of it here. The world doesn't stop, and I will make sure that if there are any supply issues, we'll try and keep everyone on top of what's happening.
All right. Patrick DeHaan, live in Las Vegas. I've been wanting to say that the entire podcast. I couldn't help it. Thanks so much for everything. That's pretty much going to wrap up Over a Barrel for this particular episode. Understandably, we are monitoring all of the circumstances, both natural disasters, the Mideast. Should something transpire that we need to throw out a special edition of our podcast, we will, of course, do that. You can stay right here and we'll keep you up to date on everything that's taking place in an expanded version. All right, that's Over a Barrel. We'll talk again coming up really soon. Have a good one. This episode of Over a Barrel has been brought to you by night or day, rain or shine. Valero keeps the pumps full 24/7, 365 with a reliable fuel supply. Because keeping pumps fueled keeps business pumping and communities moving right now.